Well, hello and welcome to our eOrganic webinar. Today we will be hearing from Dr. Juan Alvez, who will be sharing information about his research that is exploring the connections between biodiversity and livestock well-being. My name is Deb Haliba and I work at the University of Vermont Extension as eOrganic's Dairy Team Coordinator. eExtension is the organic agriculture community of practice with eExtension, and you can find all of our published articles, videos, and upcoming and recording webinars at eextension.org/organic_production. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to find the recording on our website as well as on our YouTube channel within the coming week. If you do plan to share the recording or the information presented today with others, we would greatly appreciate acknowledgement of eOrganic and today's speaker. So before we get started, I wanted to give a quick overview of today's agenda. Our session today is scheduled to end at 1/4 the hour. So Juan will give his presentation for about 45 minutes, and then we'll ask you to respond to 2 quick poll questions. And then we'll transition over to our question and answer session for the remainder of our time together. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Juan Alvez is the Pasture Program Technical Coordinator at the University of Vermont Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Juan grew up on a livestock farm in northern Uruguay and came to the U.S. to pursue his academic career. He received his Master's of Science degree from the University of Vermont Department of Plant and Soil Science and his PhD from the UVM Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources, where his dissertation focused on the relationships between ecosystem services and sustainable agriculture, particularly with regard to grazing systems. Welcome, Juan. I'm going to turn the mic right over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Alice, for introducing me. Today, I'm going to start with a brief rationale where I will explain. I will explain broadly there you go. So here's the outline, the roadmap. I will start by just describing what motivated this research, and it's mostly the biodiversity crisis we are living. I will talk about the general biodiversity crisis, and I'm going to delve down into soils and forages, and then I'm going to go into the proper study that we did at Chouanier Family Farm at Highgate, Vermont. And we're going to talk about the 3 experiments we did where we studied soils and forages, grazing behavior, and milk fatty acids from different diets. So today's agriculture is mostly a mining process where we mine nutrients, but it has been like that since 10,000 years ago, from the onset of agriculture. Basically, we started mining soils by cutting forests and making room for animals and for crops. It was okay while we were around 200 million people, but then after the Industrial Revolution, population spiked because the Industrial Revolution enabled us to tame machines, and after that we found that oil could even speed up this process. So we started, going really fast in terms of nutrient extraction from the soil, and that caused a vast loss of biodiversity that today accounts for more than 1,000 times the historic rate of extraction and rate of extinction of species, mammals, birds, fisheries, etc. So basically, today's agriculture is it is meant to feed us, but it's pretty perverse with the environment because it extracts nutrients from the soil by cutting trees, using a package that is made of irrigation, prepared seeds, use transportation to move inputs in and out, and most of the food, more than 52% of the food of the crops we plant will feed animals that we later eat, and everything is pumped up by fossil fuels, which are really inexpensive right now. And this model of agriculture leaves behind contaminated water, contaminated soils, and communities in dire situations sometimes. And this model is also approved by us because we pay taxes that feed that model, and that model produces cheap and fast food that makes possible low-income people to survive. So it has many different approaches, and it's problematic, but this is kind of an introduction to the talk, and I'm going to focus on solutions. So what are the reasons for studying biodiversity? Because we are losing it, and we still don't know the whole value of the biodiversity. We know the value of pollination. We know the value of having coral reefs. We know the value of preserving the soil, but there are many relationships that are equivalent to many gears working together. Everything is dynamic at its pace, and if we remove one gear, we don't know what can happen. This is called uncertainty, and uncertainty is more problematic than risk. So as I said before, there were massive extinctions caused by this model, and I must remind that population doubled twice during the 20th century. The second time was around the 60s, where population doubled again. And the benefits of conserving this biodiversity were found to be 100 to 1 by scholars in 2002, Bamford and other scholars. On the other side, there are scholars that talk about the dilution effect, which for instance, it's the value of the increased species richness, which reduces the density of diseases. So this affects human health, and it's one piece of the machinery, of nature's machinery, that if, for instance, if we remove forest, it increases disease transmission. So biodiversity loss can increase transmission of different diseases, and biodiversity is associated with lower disease burdens as well. For instance, the Lyme disease was found that when coyotes, which are predators, displaced foxes, which are also predators, but foxes were hunting on little rodents and mice, and there is one link that happens in mice, in crop mice, that enables the Lyme disease. And these are some of the problems that happen when we decrease biodiversity. In the Amazon, when there is deforestation, there are 278 times more bites than when there is forest standing. So another reason for studying biodiversity effects are the soils. We have been mining the soils, first extracting forest, diluting species over time, and now we are mining soils. We are throwing pesticides and herbicides, and those herbicides are interacting with soil microorganisms and are affecting the food we eat. It's been said that when soils are undisturbed, biocenosis occur, and biocenosis are basically the enabling of the food web to happen. So this is a basic ecosystem process that when soils are disrupted, we are cutting on our resilience over time. So this is every time we till the soil or plow the soil, we are losing resources that will make us lose money as farmers. So a second ecosystem process that I want to talk about is the trophobiosis, coined by a French biologist called Chabousseau. And he basically says that when we simplify our system by removing instead of working with nature, we enable pests on our crops and on our livestock. For instance, he found out that pests do not have the enzymatic capacity to cope with healthy plants that grow on healthy soils. And then the ethylene cycle, the ethylene oxygen cycle, which happens at the pore level. So imagine a healthy soil, a well aerated soil, a soil that infiltrates water at a very adequate rate, and compared to a trampled one where the soil is compacted and there's no oxygen, no water percolating through it. The ethylene oxygen cycle is like a switch where it happens at the pore level, the micropore level, where the root hairs are. So this switch basically happens when aerobic bacteria, which breathe oxygen, start reproducing, feeding on carbohydrates exuded by the roots, and they start reproducing and breathing, and at some point they deplete all the oxygen in that pore, and that pore turns anaerobic without oxygen, and then anaerobic bacteria wake up and start releasing ethylene gas. So this ethylene gas makes possible an oxidation of iron. So iron goes from ferric to ferrous, losing one electrical charge. And iron is very electrical, very magnetic, and holds to macro and micronutrients. So by losing one charge, it's possible for plants to extract phosphorus, potassium, and other micronutrients withheld by iron that now lost a charge. So these are basic ecosystem processes that happen at the soil level and are enabled by undisturbed soils. So this is a picture of a study done in 1973 by Fitko and Klinch, where he basically mapped what a healthy forest soil should look like. Most of it, more than 40%, is soil fauna, excluding earthworms, ants, and termites. About 45%, about 20-some percent, ants and termites. And then earthworms, other insects, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. So this, look how much soil fauna excluding earthworms, meaning microbiota, occupy on a healthy soil from a healthy forest. So this is one of the reasons why a healthy forest soil doesn't need any nutrients. It's because the ethylene oxide cycle is happening at a normal rate. And we don't see pests in a forest because everything is self-regulated. But the moment we start reducing and taking a reductionist approach, we start paying the price of it. So, for instance, microbes are very important. For instance, cyanobacteria produces 50% of the oxygen we breathe. Microbes make antioxidant. They are symptomatic. Atherosclerosis is associated with gut metagenome. There is a soil bacteria Prozac triggered by which triggers neuron formation and acts as a relaxant, and is caused by the Mycobacterium vaccal. Another soil microorganism, the Oxalobacter formigens, breaks down calcium oxalate, which is responsible for forming kidney stones. And these kidney stones note that there is a deficiency in microbiome in our stomach. And I love the parallel between our stomach, our gut, and the soil. Both have to be healthy for us to be healthy and not become sick. And lastly, Dr. Mitch Gaynor from New York Center for Cancer Prevention said that the future of medicine is food, and basically food was the medicine of our grandparents, but food growing in healthy soils, I would like to add. Another reason for studying biodiversity effects, the forest diversity. It's important to offer cows a diversity of forages so that they have enough nutrient elements for them to succeed and also produce the materials we extract from them, in this case milk, but also wool, eggs, meat, and etc. So it's been said that higher productivity, that forest diversity promotes higher productivity and also accumulates carbon in the soil and also in plant tissues. There's also the concept of monotony, where animals stop eating when they don't have a diverse diet. If you give them always the same, no matter how hungry they are, they won't eat anymore. But if you change their diet, they start eating right away and they gain weight. They produce more milk. And also there's the tannin versus alkaloid effect. So Tillman and others found out that even the best chosen monocultures cannot achieve greater productivity than higher diverse sites. And today it's very important for us to have alternatives for adaptation and mitigation to climate change, and having diverse cover crops is crucial, and diverse pastures is crucial, not only because they also protect the soil, but they also sink carbon and sequester carbon from the atmosphere. The model that I showed in the first slide, or the third slide after the outline, shows an agriculture that is based on monocrops, on monocultural crops. And with the problems that cause to the environment and also to farmers' economy. So basically, cows, they prefer a diverse diet. They have neurons for taste, smell, and sight. Stop responding to the taste. And when you offer them a diverse diet, they start responding again. So individuals can meet their needs for nutrients if they are offered a variety of foods, but if they cannot choose, they stop eating, and that causes problems in productivity. So another reason for diversity is the forage sequence. It's been studied that sheep eat more endophyte infected tall fescue when supplemented with tannin-containing legumes. For instance, bear's foot trefoil is a tannin-containing legume. vetch. It's another tannin containing legume, and they eat more than when supplemented with a legume that does not contain tannins, because tannins somehow inactivate alkaloids, which reduce alkalosis in animals. So this is an example that cattle grazing irrigated pastures containing burstwood trefoils were 13 times less likely to shed E. coli or 157 than cattle grazing on pastures with other forages. Tannins also can improve the color and stability of meat. Pictures are not very do not describe very well, but they can improve the color and stability. And this is sort of, a very fast overview of why we are studying biodiversity and how that relates to cow well-being and human health. On one side, on the left side of the slide, we have the disrupted ecosystem versus the structured ecosystem. And we think that by restructuring ecosystems and making them more resilient, for instance, not plowing, not disturbing the soil, but keeping soils always covered, we are able to work with soil health and make our cows eat a better diet and produce a better milk. So this is kind of the what underlies the hypothesis that we had, which is, biodiversity affects livestock well-being. And these products are healthier. For instance, cows that graze on diverse pastures, they can produce healthier organic milk because it has more favorable balance of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. The ideal rate, it's around 4 and 5, and a monoculture brings that ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 up to 20 or more. And we want to bring it down to the lowest possible. So the scope of the study, as I said before, we studied soils and forages, grazing behavior, and milk fatty acids. Our project team, this is an alphabetical order, but we have students and research technicians, and then Dr. Joe Roman, which is a research assistant professor at Rubinstein School of Natural Resources, Jana Kraft. Dr. Joe Roman is a conservation biologist, and he kind of coined this question, to the group. Jana Kraft is an assistant professor at the Department of Animal Veterinary Science at the University of Vermont. She is specialist on milk fatty acids and human studies. Dr. John Barlow is an assistant professor also at the Department of Veterinary Sciences, Animal and Veterinary Sciences at the University of Vermont, and he specializes in bacteriology. And then I am the pasture technical coordinator for the Center for Sustainable Agriculture at UVM Extension. And this research was sponsored by SARE, UVM Reach, and departments of Animal and Veterinary Science, Gund Institute, and UVM Extension. We chose one farm because we wanted to do a pilot in order to understand the basics on a farm that is a model in Vermont. It's an organic farm that belongs to the Chouanier family farm in Highgate. It's in northern Vermont, in Franklin County, and it's been organic for the last 15 years, and they graze around 78 cows. They are reducing their herd, and they graze around 78 or 80 some cows, dairy cows. So we chose 8 dairy cows from different lactations. We basically separated the cows in 3 groups, the 3 age groups and 3 lactation groups to avoid, to randomize it more. And we put these cows on 3 diets, which started with winter feed, baleage, and diverse pastures. Till June, we chose millet as a monocrop, and they started grazing millet around July 7. It took like 5 weeks for the millet to be grazable, and we planted after the winter feed. They went into diverse diet, then into millet, then into diverse again in August, and then millet, and then they went back to the barn. So to the left, there are some pictures of the diverse Northeast cool season pastures, where cows grazed for 4 weeks in a row, 2 times in June and August. And then on the right, there's a pearl millet, which we seeded about 7 acres of pearl millet. We divided in 2 so that the growth stage was the same. When cows would finish millet 1, we seeded millet 2 weeks after millet 1, so that cows would catch up with millet at the same growth stage, so not to confound. So millet died in September 19th on the first frost. It went kaput. So we brought our animals inside. And also, around early September, we lost 3 cows because they got pregnant and they started losing production. And then we were lucky that we chose 8 cows and not 4 or 6, because this way the study is valid and otherwise it would be valid, statistically valid. So. Also, grazing warm season annuals, it's a great resource to fight the summer slump, which we also suffer here in Vermont. The samples and analysis we did, so we did quality analysis for hay and baleage while cows were in the barn. We did pre and post grazing sampling. We also looked for quality, botanical composition. We did pasture monitoring, and we looked for forage soil community dynamics and ecosystem processes, and we determined the 3 main species in the farm. We also studied grazing behavior and activity by using hobo accelerometers, which are data loggers that monitor animal movement throughout the farm, and they basically record the position of the leg of one of the hind legs, and we wanted to know whether cows would prefer one diet versus the other via studying this grazing behavior. We also collected nose, hock, udder, and skin swabs for about future bacteriological study. We collected rumen fluids. We determined pH, fatty acids, and DNA to determine microbiome. We collected feces, milk, and soil samples pre and post at the beginning and at the end of the experiment. And we sampled every week for 17 weeks. This would not be possible without a lot of help from students and a wonderful research technician that we have. So these are some of the photos of the team working with the cows. Sometimes, we were researching, sampling forages. Sometimes we're sampling rumen from the microbiome. Some things were very low-tech. Some other things were very high-tech. These are the, coincidentally, we sent our soil analysis, our soil tests, our soil samples to Earthfort, which analyzes the microbes in the soil, and they do a count of ratios of bacteria to fungi, mycorrhizal colonization, flagellates, amoebas, ciliates, and with that we are able to determine whether soils where the diverse pastures were, and for the soils that millet was, and we could not determine any differences in those soils. In fact, soils were, and this is the Cornell test, and incredibly, soils where the millet was bring a nutrient calculation value of $317 to the acre versus $204 to the acre on the diverse Northeast cool season pastures. And these cool season pastures have not been plowed for the last 20 years, according to Guy Chouanier, the farmer. So we thought we were going to find really, really good soils on the diverse, but the soils under millet were really good soils too. So this picture kind of summarizes the forage results, where you have on the y-axis pounds of dry matter to the acre, and on the x-axis you have time and also treatment or diet. So you have diverse, millet, and you can see the millet filling in for the summer slump. So we also proved that warm season annuals are a good fit for filling in for the summer slump. However, in terms of productivity, millet produced 7,600 pounds of dry matter to the acre, and diverse produced 5,500 pounds of dry matter to the acre. So basically, we mapped around 16 species between grasses, forbs, and legumes, of which the pasture was mostly composed by grasses, 67%, versus almost 15% legumes, and 10% or 11% almost forbs. Some of the results, again, the farm has an excellent overall pasture forest production and management. The soils were mostly covered all the time, in especially on the diverse treatments. There was adequate manure and trampling, which enables nutrition for the microorganisms of the soil. There was adequate manure distribution across the farm. Forages were grazed at a mature stage, and at this point farmers had to do whatever they can to either catch up with the forage, because in the spring the forage really goes fast. It grows really fast. So sometimes, cows have to graze at a belly high, and that's okay as long as they can access shorter, more nutritious and more quality forages later. And we also found more earthworms and insects on the diverse area. We did not, as I said before, we did not find differences in soil biology between diverse and millet soils. So, as I said before, we monitored grazing activity by using data loggers. Those data loggers are the size of a lighter, and you wrap it on a hind leg for 2 weeks, and then you take them off. You wait 2 more weeks, and then you wrap it on the next leg, on the next hind leg, and then you monitor the movement, the leg movement across treatments. So basically, this is because optimizing laying time is important to ensure welfare and comfort, and to determine the best production possible for the cows. We were also going to use rumination collars and GPS to check where they graze, but since Guy, the farmer, grazes very tightly, and he's a really good grazer, we ruled that out because also the cost of rumination collar is very expensive. So this is not a typical tool that farmers would use, but we wanted to check whether cows preferred either monocultures or diverse pastures. So we did that monitoring. We could add a radio frequency device on the barn so that we could read and monitor on real time. There's that capability, but we did not do that. So this is also useful for detecting heat and estrus, mastitis, and it can give you clinical signs of what the cows are going through. These monitors, they can also communicate with the telephone and can give you a ring or a text whenever a cow is on heat. So this is how you put them on. It takes around 10 minutes per cow. There's no anesthesia. There's no. I mean, just wrap it up with a clinical gauze, and cows are able to use them. So when we run the numbers, we had 664 different records, and the average laying time was 9.2 hours per day. There's no effect of pasture type. There's no preference. So there's no differences between millet and diverse pastures in terms of laying time. There were differences among cows, and as I said at the beginning, we chose cows from different lactations and different ages. So those are the differences we're seeing. But we know that higher producing cows had longer average laying times. And then the third study we did at this farm was measuring the effect of grazing a monoculture versus a diverse pasture in terms of fatty acids, milk fatty acids. So basically, there's a lot of buzz in terms of benefits of milk fatty acids to human health, in terms of fighting inflammation or cancer. Basically, high omega-3s and CLAs are advertised as products from grass-fed, pasture-based dairy cows, and those products are present in pastures, in diverse pastures, mostly in grasses. So cows that graze diverse pastures, they will have that omega-3 and CLA on their milk and on their meat. Thus, they are more healthy. So the desired milk fat composition changes are an increased amount or concentration of polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly the omega-3 and the alpha-linoleic acid. Also an increase in conjugated linoleic acids. And we want for the milk to be healthier, a decrease in saturated fatty acids. Because although I'm not a specialist on fatty acids, the saturated fatty acids are the fatty acids that have more carbons on their chains, and they are harder. So think about a butter that you can spread very nicely on a bread. That's because it has higher CLAs and PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and conjugated linoleic acids, versus saturated fatty acids. So what gives the hardness to a butter are the saturated fatty acids, but the saturated fatty acids also clog our arteries, causing atherosclerosis. So not good for cardiovascular disease. So my colleague Melissa Bainbridge ran the numbers, and she didn't find differences in milk production, fat percent or protein percent between the two pasture types. So no differences, no statistical differences in percent fat, percent protein, or milk production. Both keep the milk production at the same level. However, conjugated linoleic acid are highest in milk when cows graze exclusively on diverse pastures, and there was a difference, especially when cows graze exclusively on diverse. Diversity June means baleage plus diverse. So the more baleage, the less CLA fatty acids on the baleage. But in August, cows didn't graze any baleage, so they increased the amount of CLA fatty acids. And also in August, they decreased the amount of saturated fatty acids because they grazed exclusively on a diverse pasture. On the other hand, when they were in the barn eating baleage and TMR, they had higher concentrations of saturated fatty acids. My time is coming to an end. I have 2 more slides or 3 more slides. The omega-3 acids in milk are higher when cows graze a diverse pasture versus a monoculture of pearl millet. So here are the omega-3, and this is the ratio between omega-3 and omega-6. Remembering that means letters, these letters on top means that means with a common letter differ significantly. Conclusions for this third experiment: grazing pearl millet versus diverse pastures had no effect on milk production or milk fatty acids or milk fat and protein percentages. The content of omega-3 fatty acids and CLA were highest when grazing only a diverse pasture without any supplemental baleage or TMR. And the future research is looking into the rumen microbes and their effects on the fatty acids profile of milk. So with that, we have our data, or our bacteriological data and rumen microbiological data to further this study. And we want to further the study into more farms and also different latitudes. I'd love to do the same experiment in the southern hemisphere, in a country with the southern hemisphere, to see whether this happens there as well, and whether we can find the same things there as well, because they have different soils and different forages, but the principles should be the same. Adding diversity should encourage these processes and these dynamics. Lastly, we want to study the effects of the ecosystem structure on livestock well-being. So how this all wraps up and what policy recommendations we can give to legislators to enhance and to catalyze biodiversity as a way to get better milk, better cow products, and also better health. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Great, Juan. Thank you so much. It was really interesting, and I can't believe how much research you've done up there on the Joignet farm. It's a lot.
It's just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to move on over to our Q&A period. I'm going to be reading the questions out loud to Juan, and he will answer as many as we have time for. If after the webinar you have additional questions, you can just use our online Ask an Expert system at eextension.org/ask, and we'll provide, there it is, the URL for that. Okay, Juan, terrestrial biomass, what is that?
It's, I believe that's one of the slides I show when I started explaining the biodiversity loss. Mm-hmm. Terrestrial biomass refers to the weight in millions of tons of wild animals versus domesticated animals versus humans. So on that slide, I showed that 10,000 years ago, there were about 320 million tons of wild animals, and 0.1% of that corresponded to humans. In 1900s, domesticated animals went down to probably 50 million tons, while domesticated animals and humans grew significantly. And then in the year 2000, humans and farm animals occupy 1.5 billion tons in weight. So this is a very cool study that Paul Trafurka did with data from 1900s to 2000, based on modeling and real data. So that means we are getting rid of our wildlife and exchanging that with farm animals, and the consequences of that are unknown. You know what's going to happen, because 10,000 years in a geological record is equivalent to very little time. So we don't know what are the consequences of that.
Great, thank you. So in your study, did the cattle receive supplemental grain with the other diets?
Yes. Yes. Baleage at the beginning, from end of the winter to beginning of the spring, some supplementation with baleage and TMR, a little bit of grain, and also diverse pastures.
Okay, and then did you use continuous grazing, or were they rotationally grazed?
They were rotationally grazed, and paddocks were pre and post sampled to determine animal intake, forage intake as well.
Okay. Here's a question about the millet crop. Was the millet crop also unplowed during this study?
It was not. The millet was drilled on a slightly disked soil that was behind the barn, where Guy calls that paddock a kind of sacrifice paddock. It's like a winter paddock where he puts all the bales, and cows graze there, bale graze there in the winter. So it was kind of a sacrifice paddock, and he turned into a nice green, lush millet, about 7 acres.
Okay. What's the best strategy for a producer to have their milk tested for the bovine fatty acid profiles? Is there an inexpensive way to do that?
That's a great question, and I don't know.
Okay.
But that question could be answered by either Melissa Bainbridge or Jana Kraft.
Mm-hmm.
Jana Kraft is an assistant professor and is part of the team also. Mm-hmm. And her lab runs the analysis. But I don't know how much. I believe it's $18, but don't quote me on this.
Right, and just to mention, we did an eOrganic dairy webinar with Melissa and another graduate student, Caleb, before the holidays on looking at that particular study. So you might want to go back to our eOrganic recordings, and you can find some more information about her, some more in-depth information about that studies. Okay, so this question says, in regards to a beef cow-calf operation, would you recommend a light seeding of a native pasture with monocrop, or leave it as native for the best milk production to the calf from the dam?
Boy, I'd like to leave it as a native, but then I also love to indicate some alternative for the summer slump, and warm season forages are a great alternative for the summer slump. So it's a dilemma, because I'm not for plowing or tilling the soil because of what I explained on my presentation, but the best meal comes from diverse. We found that the best meal comes from diverse pastures.
Okay.
Farmers may have to sacrifice a smaller area, and work with either Sudan grass or millet and other summer annuals, maybe cocktail cover crops with broadleaves and brassicas.
Okay. Great. Did you take any measurements on the soil organic matter in this study?
The soil organic matter was, let's see, soil organic matter, oh boy, it's too small. It's about 5.1 on the millet side and 5.2 on the diverse side.
Okay. This person says, I agree with your phrase, we are mining the soil. What's your interaction been with USDA? And this person says, how do we get USDA to adopt this way of thinking? Any suggestions?
Well, I guess these concepts are already percolating throughout the U.S. Farmers are already incorporating different tactics to enable more biodiversity on their farms. Pollinator strips, plowing less, and NRCS has been doing a great job at advertising and tweeting messages about soil health and unlocking the secrets of soil health, which enable those ecosystem functions and processes that give value to what farmers have in their farms, and thus gives independence to farmers, basically, because otherwise we are dependent on inputs from outside the farm, and I think NRCS is been working on that for the last 5 years or more. But it takes time.
It does. Were you surprised that the results between the monoculture and diversity, the pasture diversity, weren't more conclusive?
Yes, I was kind of surprised. I thought diverse was going to beat monocultures 10-0, but no. Pearl millet is really good, and I think we wanted to choose a really good forage to kind of force our hypothesis as much as possible with one of the best monoculture cover crops for warm season pastures.
I mean, it does seem like that site that you seeded down you said it was a sacrifice area, so there was already probably a lot going on in that little spot before you
There was a lot going on, yeah. The farmer uses that area to put some bales where cows park there while they wait for to be milked, and so that he doesn't sacrifice the other paddocks around the farm. So he sacrifices those 7 acres behind the barn, and it's easy for him to manage cows to come in and get milk twice a day. So it was really easy to convince him to use that area for the study, because that area has also a lot of manure and urine that bring nutrients to the soil, and so I think that's why millet grew so well. I wish I could show you the pictures, but I know we didn't have enough time.
Yeah, let me just mention that you have a research website, so I'm just going to send that link out to folks, and hopefully you'll see that. It's got some really great photos. This one person said, is more of a comment. You were talking about legumes that were high in tannins, like birds, trefoil. They also said you want to mention that they're also non-bloat, so that's another benefit of those high tannin legumes. And I just wanted to mention that we also had a researcher out in the desert, not the desert, the west, Dr. Jennifer McAdam at University of Utah, who did some work specifically on bird's foot trefoil and organic dairy cattle. So she did a webinar for us a couple of Mays ago, so you might want to check that out if you're interested in those high tannins. Let's see, I'm just going down our list here. Any thoughts about applying this principle to silvopasture?
Well, I think by adding trees to the mix, it only makes things more exciting, especially if you design a system where trees can be offering some functions to animals and to the pasture base. And also, especially if you can also harvest what the trees produce. It's been shown that forages grow much better under trees, under some shade, and the number, I think, is 32 or 35% shade, does not affect forage growth. It promotes more moisture, and because the temperature of the soil is shaded, the soil is shaded, the temperature of the soil does not go up and down, and then it produces adequate conditions for microorganisms to thrive, and that's why forages really grow lushier and thicker and taller around trees. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of potential to bring silvopasture or agroforestry.
Whoops, did we lose you again? Yeah. Can you just repeat that last bit, because you kind of cut out a bit?
Oh, sorry. I was saying that there is a lot of potential to incorporate trees to the mix of biodiversity, not only because it enhances habitat for wildlife and quality habitats, but it also produces, I haven't measured the pasture quality under the shade, but it has been shown that forages can grow very well, even better than under the sun, under full sun, if they're not shaded over 32 or 35%. So a little bit of shade also helps soil microorganisms and soil temperature by not changing the temperature so much. Those microorganisms are able to thrive and to reproduce and to exudate and mine soil micronutrients that are available to forage plants.
Great. Do you know if anybody has looked at a diverse mix of summer annuals that might keep those CLA levels high during the summer slump?
Well, I submitted a couple of proposals trying to look at that. They were not invited to us to submit a full proposal. So I want to study that, but I think people in Middlebury are studying diverse, and also in St. Albans with Heather Darby and Jeff Carter are studying diverse cover crops. However, I don't know if they are looking at the milk fatty acids or the forage fatty acids content.
Right, and those are two Vermont researchers or extension professionals, and they're looking at more from a cover crop angle rather than a livestock feed. But there are some. There is a project that's going on at the University of New Hampshire that might be looking at that, so we can look into that.
Oh yes, Dr. Andrew Brito in University of New Hampshire is looking at something similar too, right?
With regard to CLAs and fatty acids, there was another question in here about forage species. What forage species do you think can drive either the reduction or increase of fatty acids?
You mean what forage species?
Forage species.
Well, grasses, forbs, and legumes together act as a supermarket and a pharmacy for cows. So, and also the stage of the forages, the height of the forages determine the quality of the pasture. So the higher and more mature, the least relative feed value of the pasture. But in terms of species, orchard grass, timothy, ryegrass, meadow fescue, brome, bent grass, quackgrass, Kentucky blue, and also summer annuals such as sorghum Sudan, pearl millet. In terms of legumes, birthfoot trefoil, white clover, red clover, veg, common veg, hairy veg, cowpea, plantain, dandelion, burdock, even milkweed. And our center studied how cows can learn to eat weeds and how some weeds are really extremely valuable in terms of nutrients for cows. So that's another great resource. Teaching cows to eat weeds. It takes 7 to 8 days, and you gain a resource and assets and end the problem on your farm.
Great. This is a question about the pearl millet. Is it not a serious weed issue in annual production like corn?
Pearl millet or weeds around pearl millet?
I think pearl millet as a weed is what I'm I'm reading.
It can be if you let it go to seed. If it goes to seed, then it can persist, but it will die on the first frost.
Mm-hmm. They suggest in southern Idaho it can be a serious weed problem, but here in the the Northeast it's not so much. We get a cold winter that kills it out.
Sure. Well, if you harvest, if you graze it before seed, there's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking through the rest of the questions here. I think we've nature finds a way to survive no matter what humans do to change things. Agreed?
Yes. Yes. When we're not here, nature will manage to reinvent itself, and the world is not going to end. It will reinvent itself. New species are going to emerge, as always, and the more we get rid of biodiversity, the more we're going to approach collapse of our own species, because this is an ecological concept. When you deplete all the resources, the species collapse.
Great. And I think that's the last word, Juan. I think that's all the questions that we have in the queue here. So I'm going to thank everybody for your questions, and to mention again that you can find the recording of today's session as well as recordings of our other webinars that we mentioned and others. And we also have articles, videos, and more at eextension.org/organic_production, or you can see the URL there, the link on the web, on the site there. And Juan, thank you so much for sharing your research projects with us and for joining us.
Thank you, Deb, and thanks everybody for attending the workshop.